I'm so looking forward to speaking with Flavio Volpe, who is the president of Canada's Automotive Parts Manufacturing Association. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure, Amber.
Well, we want to talk about the news that US President Donald Trump is moving ahead with a 25% tariff on imported vehicles on April 2nd. That is the situation right now. Can you break that down for us? What does this mean?
Well, I give you a really complicated technical breakdown, but I think I should just start by saying it's nuts. It's a tariff on every single vehicle import into the U.S. at 25%, which is probably about 4 to 5 times the profit margin of every single one of those vehicles. We'll put those vehicles in two buckets. One is the rest of the world outside of North America. There's no American content on those. On the North American vehicles, and I'll speak for Canada, but I think the numbers are very similar for Mexico. About half the cars that get made here, we have a capacity for about 2 million a year, are American brands. 50% of the content in the 2 million cars come from American factories. 55% of the raw material, steel from Pennsylvania, resins from Texas, are American. And so the president has taken aim at American interests in Canada and Mexico, while he is talking about using a tariff wall to repatriate jobs that have been here for 120 years. All he's doing, and the market is telling him that in math, that he's hurting General Motors, Ford, and the American brands of Stellantis and American part suppliers and American raw material suppliers just as badly as he's threatening Canadian entities.
So you mentioned jobs. I think we often hear people talk about the automotive industry, both here in Canada and in the US, in terms of how it will be impacted. But really what we're talking about is auto workers and potentially hundreds of thousands. Can you put that into perspective in terms of how many people this will or could affect and how quickly that could happen?
Yeah, I'll give you three numbers for Canada, and I'll give you one main number for the US. In Canada, there's 125,000 people that make something, either the cars or the parts or the tools for the parts in the cars. Then there's about 375,000 that we call them indirect jobs, but they are directly related to the manufacturing sector. They facilitate that manufacturing or the delivery of that product or financial services on that product. That if that product and that industry didn't exist, those jobs would have to, you'd have to find other customer industries or you're gone too. And then there's probably another 250 to 300,000 jobs for a grand total of about 750,000 that are in automotive sales and service, the dealers, the independent businesses that are across this country that rely on that product coming in, all of whom would be severely impacted by this. The other side of the border, the most important number is 950,000 Americans make parts or cars or the tools for those parts and cars. Similar spin-off, you're talking millions of people in the auto sector, but those ones, just like the 125,000 here, are very likely to be sitting at home within a week or two of the imposition of those tariffs because none of the companies involved can absorb that 25%, and none of their end customers would buy vehicles to absorb those costs.
It's really unbelievable. And I heard you do an interview on CBC where you said it's like a monkey with a machine gun.
Yeah.
Why would he and they want to do this?
Well, I think yesterday he was concerned with the saving the job of the Secretary of Defense. And he caught his own government by surprise. Around midday yesterday, earlier in the week, the talk of sectoral tariffs had been pushed off past April 2nd. Widely reported, Reuters, Wall Street Journal. Middle of the day yesterday, as we're the coverage of war plans being texted out on Signal started to cause a real problem, he said, we're going to make a tariff announcement at 4 o'clock on automotive. They're coming now. He didn't get to that until 5:30, in part, as I'm told, they were all scrambling, saying, we're not ready. On what basis of law are we doing this? Who's covering it? Is it cars? Is it parts? Who's it on? And he just went out ahead of them. Evidence of that is he did his pronouncement and he couldn't answer the questions on Does that include parts? And how do you deal with American content? And over the course of the evening and into the overnight, various clarifications. So when you wake up this morning, cars on April 3rd, not even April 2nd, Amber, I don't know what you need the extra day for. Maybe you wanted to save April 2nd for his Liberation Day. April 3rd on cars, May 3rd on parts. And oh, by the way, if that vehicle made in Canada has American content in it, the American content would be excluded from the tariff imposition. And you should be happy because that means your tariff is not 4 times the profit margin. It's only going to be about 2 times the profit margin.
When you put this into perspective, especially with all the numbers, I mean, it is staggering. But one thing I also wanted to learn from you is just how deeply embedded this tariff-free relationship in automotive has been over the decades, because it isn't like he's undoing something that President Biden did just a few years ago. It's something that has been a relationship that has worked for many, many decades.
Yeah, look, a lot of this discussion is about free trade, and the first free trade agreement between any 2 major developed countries was the U.S.-Canada Auto Pact of 1965, which just focused on this sector and said, in gross terms, if you can guarantee the production of 1 unit for every vehicle purchased in Canada, we'll invest. The D3 at the time was the D4, included AMC, will invest in Canada for that production, and then the goods can go back and forth. We have had free trade in automotive for 60 years. When we present various charts that say, oh, well, these parts can cross a border up to 7 or 8 times before they get delivered to a customer as a vehicle, and the sourcing for major components could come from Mexico, Canada, and US for the same, rear suspension assembly. The president says, well, that's inefficient. Howard Lutnick, who is another stable genius, says that's inefficient. I said, only if you look at a map. In automotive, we look at the satellite image and we grind it down. What's the difference between Windsor and Detroit? The border that we canceled for economic terms in 1965. And the biggest winners in this free trade arrangement has been General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, Jeep. And they've been begging for him to back off. And he's ignoring them. Who's he doing it for?
Well, that really brings me to my next question, because one of the things that we do on this show, where we talk a lot about technology, is that we talk about what's happening with Elon Musk, with Tesla. Yep. And when I look into Tesla vehicles, they top the list in terms of vehicles with high domestic content. So arguably, this could potentially benefit Elon Musk. And we've seen this story repeat itself over and over again over the past few weeks, where Elon tends to benefit from a lot of these decisions. What would you say to that?
Well, you're probably reading my X feed, because I said this morning, is it a coincidence that these tariffs benefit directly the Tesla business? This is a company that, for lots of smart reasons, in trying to drive the cost down for electric vehicles, has tried to insource a whole bunch of their component manufacturing, and then doing things like big gigacastings. So reducing the number of parts that they rely on and doing them themselves. The biggest production plant in the US by units of volume is a Tesla plant in Fremont, California. Makes about 650,000 cars a year. A little aside, what used to be the biggest one that did 750,000 cars a year is in that direction in Oshawa, Ontario. Elon Musk and Tesla they make cars in Fremont, California. They make that silly Cybertruck in Texas, and they're competing with the Chinese. They're competing with BYD, who has caught up to them in terms of units of sales in EVs. But BYD also makes internal combustion engine vehicles and hybrids, etc. How is Tesla going to compete with BYD when it buys its batteries from CATL, when its other major production node is Shanghai? Well, let me walk you through real quick how that might work. If you break the Ford business and the GM business and the American divisions of Stellantis, and all of those businesses sell 900,000 pickup trucks. The Ford F-Series, the number one selling, 950,000 pickup trucks. All their SUV business, Mustang. Same thing with General Motors, Jeep, and Ram. Elon Musk bought Twitter, leveraging the Tesla balance sheet for $44 billion and didn't sweat. The current market cap of Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis is in the same area. In 1979, Chrysler was going out of business, and Lee Iacocca got Jimmy Carter to help him. In 2009, Chrysler was going out of business, got Barack Obama to help him. He's got two presidents. If the president can break the business of one of the D3, he might do what Barack Obama did, which is bring Sergio Marchionne and Fiat in to partner with Chrysler. To me, if you wanted to set up Elon Musk's Tesla's growth through mergers and acquisitions and come forward as the American savior, this is the way you do it.
Absolutely. I'm just waiting for Mark Zuckerberg to announce that Meta is building a car at this rate.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like we're coming to that point, unfortunately. So the question I think many Canadians have on their minds is not just can Canada survive this in the automotive sector, but how can we survive this if, in fact, these tariffs are enforced?
Well, let me add one more question at the beginning of that for context. Should Canada survive this? Because I got a lot of people say to me, well, why do we need to be in the automotive sector? And then the other questions. I always answer that with the automotive sector is the big leagues around the world. Every major jurisdiction around the world says, what's the biggest aggregate product for advanced applications of technology, AI, machine learning, advanced metallurgies, building clusters where you have tens of thousands of jobs that feed families and pay mortgages. So yeah, we should try. And can we? Well, I think what was interesting is Mark Carney on the election trail yesterday, in his role as party leader, said, okay, look, scenario A, we should fix it. We should make sure that we keep access to the U.S. market at all costs. Scenario B, if it breaks, and he puts up a tariff wall that's 25, 50, 75% with all these layers. We make 2 million cars a year and we buy 2 million cars a year. We have the supply and demand to have a relevant industry. Before Donald Trump showed up, I would say that would be incredibly inefficient. That would drive the prices up. Well, he's about to drive them up to almost double in some cases. Can we convince those companies that are here that they could and should build where they sell, and then support the auto sector, the suppliers, and the tool makers and the raw material suppliers? Say, look, how do we help you through that transition? Could we do that? I think the answer is possibly. I think we have to try, because once we lose those clusters, like Australia did, then you lose your ability to aggregate at scale all kinds of new technologies that drive other clusters in the economy. I think the KW and Ottawa's technology clusters are our competitive advantage in automotive in Canada. We have a connected autonomous future potential, but Donald Trump is trying to mercantilize us to say, we don't need that. We want the stuff that's in the ground. Well, we'll keep it.
Absolutely. Now, you've made a number of trips to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
What has come out of those trips?
Well, as of yesterday, nothing. But before yesterday, I would have said that those trips are math missions. I know the pendulum is swinging like a wrecking ball in Donald Trump's whatever path he wants to send it in. But at some point, that kinetic energy is going to slow down. And if you do something like he's threatened to do here for April 3rd, and we cause for hundreds of thousands of auto workers to be home across the U.S. states, I go meet congressional reps and senators, and I say, in Huntsville, Alabama, there's 1,230 jobs with a Canadian auto parts supplier. You know that if the president sinks that supplier here, you got a problem locally. And then beyond that, if he sinks the sector, and in that cluster there in the area, there's 7,000 jobs that serve a Mercedes plant. That Mercedes plant is going to close down on these. What are you going to do about it? And I arm them with the math. And then we connect them to the plant managers and say, look, you may not want to go now, You certainly aren't listening to me. We don't need allies. We just need you to understand we have common cause. But when the world ends, here's the number for the plant manager. Go see them. Go see those workers who ultimately, this is not an academic exercise. If you're making $30 an hour, working 40 hours a week, and you're in Birmingham, you're feeding your kids, you're paying mortgage or rent, not much more. If you got two incomes that are doing that, you got a pretty good life. If that plant goes away, how many people can work at the Amazon distribution center or the Walmart, which are noble jobs, but there are only so many, and they rely on people having incomes in the communities to be able to buy stuff. If those incomes go away, what are we talking about?
Absolutely. Now,
Yeah.
I have been following you for a long time on social media, and I know you've been raising alarms about this very issue since late in 2024. And I know you're doing dozens and dozens of interviews every single week. So I wanted to ask you for my last question, is there anything that you haven't been asked or you're not regularly asked that you would like to share before we let you go?
Well, I think that sometimes we deal with the acute crisis, and then we don't get to talk about the promise of the auto sector and why this is actually a crisis. What do you want to keep here? Um, and we haven't been talking about the Chinese since we started talking about Washington. The Chinese have built an incredible sector. Now, of course, it's subsidized and to the point where they're just trying to buy market share around the world. But they understand that electric vehicles are connected autonomous vehicles that are part of smart cities that help to generate terabytes of data in the lifetime of each one of the vehicles. That is incredibly valuable for human beings. They use it for different reasons, but geospatial, behavioral, climactic, and AI and machine learning has allowed for all that data to be able to be crunched and used in real time. We have an incredible cluster of applied technology, both in software and hardware in this country, that is about to become part of this auto sector. And then we work together. The auto sector is a scale application for everybody. And then we got all kinds of critical minerals in the ground here whose business case is helped if all those cars electrify. And so it isn't just the bashing of metal and the melting of plastic. It's all of the really advanced core competencies and advantages that we have in this country, able to cluster around the second biggest expense that human beings have on the planet after shelter. And we are a burgeoning superpower in that space. We are in the big leagues. We've snuck our way in without a Canadian automaker, and all of that is being threatened by someone in the White House who doesn't understand it, doesn't care about it. And if he had his own way, we would beg to join them and hand everything over to them.
Well said, and never going to happen. So thank you for all
Never
your
gonna happen.
efforts with everything that you're doing. I know you're off to another interview, and as always, so appreciate your time. And I do want to say that, hey, things are evolving and changing, so maybe you'll come back on the show in a couple of weeks, and hopefully we have some better news. Thanks so much.
I'd come anytime. And let me say my last thought is thank you, because you're a champion of technology in Canada and helping to make those conversations real everywhere that I go. And so it's a pleasure to be on here and pleasure to work together with you. Canada forever.